The FIA did not need to take Antonelli's trophy away to create panic. All it had to do was leave Monaco unfinished. A 19-year-old Mercedes driver crossed the line first, 6.271 seconds ahead of Lewis Hamilton in Ferrari Red, after surviving a red flag, cold tires, a broken track surface, and one of the most chaotic penalty storms of the season. But then the word appeared. Provisional. And suddenly, the biggest win of Antonelli's career was trapped inside an FIA investigation that could rewrite the podium, erase a rookie's dream result, threaten Cadillac's first Formula One point, and leave Mercedes furious at the one thing no team can control after the checkered flag: the stewards. Because Antonelli may have won the race on the road. But Monaco was about to prove something much scarier. In Formula One, winning first does not always mean you are safe. Subscribe to the channel. Monaco is the one race where a victory can look finished and still feel completely unsafe. That is the first thing Mercedes understood. Because Antonelli did not arrive in Monte Carlo as just another young driver chasing a big result. He arrived as the most watched driver in Formula One. 19 years old. Leading the championship. Driving the Mercedes W17. Winning so early, so often, and so calmly that the rest of the grid had already started asking uncomfortable questions. And those questions mattered before the race even began. Earlier in the season, rival teams had already raised concerns about Mercedes' power unit performance. Nothing had been proven. Mercedes denied wrongdoing. The FIA reviewed the situation, and no formal punishment followed. But Formula One does not forget suspicion that quickly. It hangs in the paddock. It follows the car out of the garage. It turns every fast lap into something people study twice. So when Antonelli put Mercedes on pole in Monaco, it was not only a sporting achievement. It was a message. A message to Ferrari. A message to Red Bull. A message to every engineer watching the timing screen and wondering how a 19-year-old could look so composed on the most unforgiving circuit in the world. But here is the problem. Monaco does not reward speed alone. Monaco rewards control. You can have the fastest car on the grid, but if you touch the wall, your race is over. You can have the perfect strategy, but if the pit stop comes at the wrong moment, you lose everything. You can be leading comfortably, but if a red flag resets the race, the pressure returns as if the first part never happened. And that is why Antonelli's pole position was both a gift and a trap. Starting first at Monaco is priceless, because overtaking is brutally difficult. But starting first also means everyone is measuring you. Every braking zone. Every tire choice. Every radio message. Every small hesitation. There is nowhere to hide when you are the leader. Behind Antonelli, the threat was stacked perfectly. Max Verstappen started close enough to make the first corner dangerous. Lewis Hamilton lined up in third, wearing Ferrari red in the city where Formula One history feels louder than anywhere else. Charles Leclerc started fourth, carrying the emotional weight of his home race, a race that has broken his heart too many times. That front of the grid was not just competitive. It was loaded. A teenage championship leader trying to prove his dominance was real. A Red Bull champion trying to stop the bleeding. Hamilton trying to turn Ferrari's Monaco weekend into a statement. Leclerc trying to finally take control of the race that always seems to escape him. And underneath all of it, the FIA was already part of the story. Not because the victory had been questioned yet. Because Monaco had already started producing small warnings. In practice, pit lane speeding fines appeared. Antonelli was fined for going just over the limit. Russell had one. Alonso had one too. Small numbers. Small margins. The kind of detail that can feel meaningless when cars are flying through the tunnel at full commitment. But at Monaco, small details are never harmless for long. The pit lane speed limit is not a suggestion. It is a line drivers cannot cross. And if they cross it, even by almost nothing, the penalty system does not care how innocent it looked. That was the hidden warning. Before the race had even started, Monaco was already telling the grid what kind of weekend this would become. A weekend where procedure mattered. A weekend where tiny errors could snowball. A weekend where the slowest part of the circuit might become just as dangerous as the fastest. And Mercedes had to know the danger. Because Antonelli could drive a perfect race and still be surrounded by chaos created by everyone else. That is the cruel thing about Formula One. A driver can control the car, control the tires, control the gap, and control the start, but he cannot control what the stewards investigate after the flag. He cannot control whether another driver lines up incorrectly at a restart. He cannot control whether a rival speeds in the pit lane. He cannot control whether the track surface begins to break apart. He cannot control whether the final classification becomes provisional. And that is exactly why this Monaco Grand Prix was so explosive. Antonelli's greatest strength was his calmness. But Monaco was preparing a race where calmness might not be enough. Because the real danger was not only Hamilton behind him. It was not only Verstappen near him. It was not only the walls waiting for one mistake. The real danger was that the entire result could become unstable. And once a Formula One result becomes unstable, no celebration is safe. Not the winners. Not the podiums. Not even a historic first point for a new team. That is what made the opening phase of this Grand Prix feel so tense. Everyone could see Antonelli's speed. Everyone could see Mercedes' confidence. Everyone could see Hamilton and Ferrari waiting for one chance. But the most important story was still invisible. It was building in the rulebook. It was building in the pit lane. It was building in every tiny margin that looked too small to matter. And by the time the lights went out, Monaco had already set the trap. Antonelli was about to drive the race of his life. But Formula One was about to ask a much harsher question. Would winning on the road be enough? The race began with the kind of moment that can completely change a championship before the first lap is even finished. Antonelli got away cleanly. That mattered more than anything. At Monaco, the start is not just the start. It is the first verdict. If you lead into the opening corners, you control the shape of the race. If you lose the lead, you may spend the entire afternoon staring at a gearbox, trapped by walls, dirty air, and a circuit that gives almost nothing back. Antonelli knew that. Mercedes knew that. And the entire grid knew that if he escaped the first few seconds, the race would immediately become harder for everyone behind him. He did escape. But behind him, the first shock hit instantly. Max Verstappen's Red Bull stalled almost straight away. One of the biggest threats to Antonelli's victory was suddenly gone, not after a long battle, not after a strategy mistake, not after a wheel-to-wheel fight through the streets, but almost before the race had even taken shape. For Mercedes, it looked like the door had opened. But in Monaco, an open door can still lead into a trap. Because Verstappen's retirement did not remove the pressure. It moved it. Now the threat came from Ferrari. Lewis Hamilton was still there, hunting in red. Charles Leclerc was still close enough to keep the home crowd emotionally attached to every lap. And for Antonelli, that meant there was no chance to relax. Hamilton did not need to attack immediately to be dangerous. He only needed to stay close enough. Close enough to force Mercedes to think twice about strategy. Close enough to make every pit stop feel risky. Close enough to remind Antonelli that one missed braking point, one slow exit, one bad restart, could turn a historic win into a lost opportunity. And this is where Antonelli's race started to become more impressive than it looked from the outside. Because leading Monaco is not peaceful. It looks peaceful on the timing screen. The leader crosses the line first. The gap appears. The commentators talk about control. But inside the cockpit, control feels fragile. The walls are inches away. The tires change every lap. The steering never truly rests. The radio can interrupt your concentration at any moment. The car is heavy, then lighter. The grip is there, then it fades, then it comes back in a different way. And all the while, the driver knows one thing. There is no escape route. At most tracks, a mistake can be corrected with speed. At Monaco, a mistake becomes a photograph. A broken front wing. A stranded car. A safety car. A headline. Antonelli had to lead without overdriving, push without looking desperate, and manage the pace without giving Hamilton any reason to believe the win was becoming vulnerable. But while Antonelli was controlling the front, the Grand Prix behind him was beginning to turn into something much darker. The pit lane started swallowing drivers. First, the warnings from practice began to feel important. Those tiny fines, those tiny margins, those tiny breaches that looked like background noise before the race, suddenly became the pattern that defined the afternoon. George Russell was hit with a penalty. Hamilton received a pit lane speeding penalty during his stop. Gasly was caught too. Other drivers were pulled into the same problem. And that changed everything. Because a pit lane penalty at Monaco is not like a pit lane penalty somewhere else. On a wider circuit, a driver can fight back. He can overtake. He can use tire advantage. He can recover with pace. At Monaco, a penalty can feel like a locked gate. You may still have the speed, but there is nowhere to use it. That is what made the race so dangerous for Mercedes. Antonelli was clean at the front, but Russell was falling into chaos behind him. A 5-second penalty damaged his race. Then came more complications. Then a drive-through penalty later in the afternoon. By the time the classification settled provisionally, Russell was buried in 13th. The contrast was impossible to ignore. One Mercedes looked untouchable. The other looked trapped. And when a team has one car dominating while the other is drowning in penalties, the paddock always starts whispering. Not always fairly. Not always with evidence. But Formula One is built on comparison. Every teammate is a mirror. Every gap raises questions. Every mistake becomes part of a bigger pattern. And that meant Antonelli's drive was being judged on two levels at once. On the road, he was leading brilliantly. In the paddock, his performance was feeding the wider debate that had followed Mercedes all season. Was this just a generational talent taking control? Was this the W17 giving him a platform nobody else could match? Or was the rest of the field watching a combination that was simply too strong for comfort? That question was still open. Then the race started producing consequences everywhere. Hamilton's penalty mattered, but he survived it well enough to remain one of the central figures. Gasly's penalty situation became far more damaging, because he was fighting for a podium. Had Jar stayed in the picture, waiting for the kind of opportunity young drivers dream about, Perez was moving towards something enormous for Cadillac, a point that would mean far more than a single number on a standings table. And slowly, the Monaco Grand Prix stopped feeling like a race decided only by speed. It became a race decided by who could stay out of trouble with the FIA. That is a very different kind of pressure. Drivers are used to fighting each other. They are used to defending, attacking, managing tires, saving energy, listening to strategy calls, adjusting brake balance, and surviving traffic. But when the stewards become part of the rhythm, the mental load changes. A driver is not only asking, "Where is the car behind me?" He is asking, "Did I cross the line correctly? Did I serve the penalty properly? Was my pit lane speed legal? Will that restart be questioned? Is the result I am earning right now actually going to stand?" That uncertainty spreads through a team like electricity. The pit wall starts calculating alternate versions of the race. Engineers look at gaps differently. Strategists stop thinking only about track position and start thinking about possible time penalties. Every position becomes conditional. This driver is third, unless the penalty lands. That driver is 10th, unless the investigation changes it. This podium exists, unless the FIA takes it away. And sitting above all of that was Antonelli. First on the road. First on the timing screen. But surrounded by a race that was becoming less stable with every lap. That is the exact kind of situation that can make a team furious. Because Mercedes could control Antonelli's pace. They could control his tire management. They could control his communication. They could warn him about the restart. They could keep him calm. But they could not control the chaos behind him. They could not control Russell's penalty spiral. They could not control Hamilton's infringement. They could not control Gasly's lost podium. They could not control whether Hadjar's positioning would be judged legal. They could not control whether Perez would keep Cadillac's historic point. And most importantly, they could not control how the outside world would talk about the win if the official result stayed under review. That is the hidden fear in every controversial race. Not just losing points. Losing clarity. A clean victory can become a debated victory. A historic achievement can become a headline with a question mark. A young driver's best day can become tangled in arguments he did not create. Antonelli had to keep driving through that possibility. Lap after lap, the race demanded precision. And every time he passed the final corner, the next danger was waiting without anyone fully knowing it yet. Anthony Nogues. The last corner on the lap. The place that usually sends a driver back across the line and into another cycle of pressure. But this time, that corner was beginning to become the center of the entire story. The track surface was starting to fail. At first, it did not sound like the defining detail of the Grand Prix. It sounded like one more Monaco problem in a race already full of them. But for a Formula One driver, the track surface is not background. It is everything. A driver trusts the road the way a tightrope walker trusts the wire. Not emotionally. Mechanically. Brake here, turn here, commit here, and the car should respond. But when the surface breaks apart, trust disappears. And once trust disappears at Monaco, the walls feel closer. Lance Stroll was the first major warning. Fighting issues with his Aston Martin, he went wide at the final corner and struck the barrier. The safety car came out, and in that instant, the race changed shape again. Safety cars at Monaco are terrifying for strategists. They create opportunity, but they also create panic. Pit now, and you might gain. Pit now, and you might lose track position forever. Stay out, and you might inherit the lead. Stay out, and you might be helpless later. Every option looks right for 3 seconds, then wrong for the next 3. Most of the field reacted. Fresh tires became the obvious temptation. Mercedes had to protect Antonelli. Ferrari had to protect Hamilton and Leclerc. Alpine had to protect Gasly. Red Bull had to think about Hadjar. Cadillac had to protect the point that was suddenly becoming possible. And Ferrari made the call that pulled Leclerc deeper into the emotional heart of the race. Hamilton was brought in. Leclerc was told to follow. But Leclerc did not agree. That disagreement was not just a strategy argument. It was Monaco pain speaking through the radio. Leclerc had spent the race frustrated, already complaining about his brakes, already feeling the weight of another home Grand Prix slipping into complication.